Raven's Fight by Diane Sylvie. Chapter 3. Marcy woke up after a 3-day binge of booze, drugs, and partying. Her head ached, her eyes were blurry. The chair she had passed out in was damp. She started to get up, but fell back into it. Her head throbbed. She tried to move slowly, to keep her body still. Some guy she didn't recognize passed out beside her. She raced for the bathroom and knelt in front of the toilet bowl. She knew she would be sick. She knew she was sick. When she had pulled herself up off the filthy floor, each tiny movement caused her head to pound excruciatingly. She leaned over the sink and turned the tap on full blast, scooped cold water into her cupped palms and splashed it on her face, rinsed her mouth, wishing desperately for a toothbrush. She could swear her teeth were starting to rot. She looked into the cracked mirror at the haggard face, dull eyes, and lifeless eyes dull and lifeless, hair tangled and matted. She ran her trembling fingers through the knots. The stranger in the mirror did the same. "Oh God," she moaned. "Is this really me? Do I look this bad?" She gently touched her cracked and swollen lips. Why were they so sore? What had she been doing for the past 3 days? Tripping on anything and everything she could get her hands on. First the whiskey and beer, then heroin, maybe even some coke. She couldn't remember who had passed her the first hit, but she wasn't picky. She would have gotten high with whoever happened to be around. She looked around the room now. Everyone was passed out. They would be asleep until the next party started. They only awakened after dark, nocturnal animals slinking around about the city. How many of these people did she really know anyway? When it came down to it, they looked after themselves first. What did she care? It all seemed so long ago, so distant, like her family. If they could see her now, they would be so ashamed. They might even feel they had failed her when it was so obviously the other way around. Some of the kids she'd met had left poor homes. Others had left suburbia. Some had run away from abusive parents, drunks, foster homes, or children's aid. Others were just bored and looking for attention. But she had left a good home. Marcy half stumbled, half walked back to her apartment. Her head hung to hide her embarrassing appearance. She said she'd quit drugs, said she was through with the parties, said when the next party rolled around, she'd remember how sick she'd been the morning after. This time, she was determined to kick the habit. It was 10 a.m., and her room was its usual mess. She looked around, realizing Rita had moved out. All of her clothes were gone, except for a couple faded tops and a pair of stained jeans. She snatched the clothes off the floor, reached for a bar of soap and threadbare towel. In the drawer by the sink, she looked for a pair of scissors and a comb. She walked down the hall to the washroom, turned the cold tap on full blast, and jumped into the tub, clothes and all. The water was freezing. Marcy leapt out of the tub, pulled the plug, and stripped off her wet clothes. She had needed the shock to snap her out of her stupor. She ran a hot bath and waited while the tub filled. A new start needed a new image. Grabbing the scissors and a handful of her long, dark hair, she snipped off the chunks that fell to the floor. She stuffed her shorn locks and old clothes into the garbage under the sink before getting into the tub, scrubbing her skin until it was sore, getting out and toweling off. After she dressed, she brushed her teeth again and went back to the room. Marcy took a sip of juice, hoping she could keep it down. She hadn't had a good night's sleep in days. Her head was splitting. She was cold, and her stomach was tied in a tight knot. She was in pain. She needed a fix. She began to sweat. She felt sick. Maybe she could just take a little something to get rid of the headaches. A rap on the door. Frightened, she lay quietly on the bed. Another rap on the door, then another. "Go away! Just go away!" she mumbled under her breath. "Marcy? Marcy, are you there?" A gentle voice questioned. It was J.L. Thank God. She didn't want J.L. to see her like this, but she couldn't just leave him standing out there. She got up, opened the door, and lurched back to the bed. She was in dire need of a hit, something to stabilize her. She managed to roll onto her back and fling her arm across her eyes. "What's the matter, J.L.?" she asked, concerned. "I was partying last night," Marcy mumbled. Her body shivered on the bed. J.L. grabbed a blanket and pulled it gently over her. "What happened to your beautiful hair?" he moaned. "It will grow back. Don't worry. I hurt all over. I've got to have something," she begged. That's why you're like this in the first place. You can't keep taking drugs. You've got to fight it. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding her hand. Marcy's body was stronger than her mind. It knew what it wanted, knew what it needed, and knew what would make it feel good. She made it to the sink in time to retch. Shaking badly, she walked toward the closet, got the last shirt out of the cupboard, grabbed the towel and soap, and headed for the door. "I'll be right back," she mumbled. JL sat at the kitchen table, waiting while she cleaned herself up. For the rest of the morning she shook and threw up, but after several hours drifted off to sleep. When she awoke, she was pale, weak, and visibly shaken. She knew it was too soon to say she was free of it all. She still yearned for that high, that feeling of total bliss that lasted for only 20 seconds, but tempted her every hour of every day. Raven sat in the restaurant in the bus depot, eating an egg sandwich. It had cost less than $2. She'd like a hot chocolate, but it would cost another $1. She asked the woman at the counter for a cup of water instead, then pulled her sister's diary out of her knapsack and flipped through the pages, looking for the name of a street Marcy had mentioned on one of the entries. It would be somewhere to start. She found it. Hastings and a reference to a person named JL. After checking the free map of the city she had picked up at the depot, she realized Hastings ran parallel to the water. Raven folded the paper, stuffed it into her back pocket, and double-checked her directions with the waitress. "Hastings and where?" "Hastings in Maine," Raven replied, hopefully. "Why do you want to go there? The Strip is no place for a young girl like you." "I'm looking for my sister, Marcy," Raven confided. She pulled out her wallet to show the woman Marcy's picture. Behind the picture, the waitress spotted a couple of 20s. "Listen, kid. You're not going to get too far if you're this careless. You don't just flash your wallet around like that. Somebody spots those 20s and your wallet will be gone faster than you can blink. My advice to you is to head home." "I can't. I have to find her." "Well, if you're determined, then play it smart. Head out the main doors across to Main Street. Turn right toward the North Shore Mountains. Main Street runs into Hastings. The corner of Main and Hastings is a dangerous place. Be prepared for anything. It isn't safe, even during the day." "Thanks for your help," Raven said as she over her shoulder. "Hold on to your bag and don't talk to anyone who looks suspicious," the waitress shouted after her. Raven removed the picture of her sister from her wallet and placed it carefully inside her jacket pocket. In the same moment, she spotted a man lying in the bushes. Should she get the police or an ambulance? Empty bottles of Pearl River rice wine were strewn across the ground. The man snorted and rolled over. He was alive, but barely. She was too small to confront him herself, but she found it difficult to just walk away. Maybe someone inside the store on the corner would call for help. But when she told the shopkeeper, he just said it happened all the time and the guy would wake up eventually and stumble off. She remembered learning about the effects of rice wine in her DARE class at school. The visiting policeman had said it was more potent and dangerous than holding a revolver to your head. It killed brain cells that quickly. Not only had he had warned its high salt content could do permanent damage to your kidneys. She continued walking to the intersection of Pender and Main, Chinatown. Bright red and yellow banners with Chinese writing painted on them hung in doorways. Long bags of candy dangled from the awnings. Mandarin oranges strung in a silver wire stretched in the wind. Chinese music flowed from the open stores and upstairs windows. Storekeepers loudly advertised their wares to prospective buyers and patiently restacked the vegetables. Fish tanks full of live crabs, lobsters, oysters, and conch shells stood next to aisles laden with plum sauce, green and red peppers, and sugar cane. In a restaurant window, a glazed duck on a rotisserie turned slowly in barbecue steam. Despite the tempting sights and smells, she stuck to her mission and kept walking. At the corner of Main and Hastings, she turned left and walked along the north side of the street. A small group of men hung around the alleyway by a hotel. A sign in a window said, "No drugs, no dealing, no loitering. You are being videotaped." One man's jerky body movements reminded her of Ted last night when he had said he needed a fix. He was obviously ill, mentally and physically. She quickly averted her eyes and walked on. Just past the hotel, a man hovered over a heating vent for warmth. His fingers were dark red and looked like large sausages. His other hand was swollen and looked broken. He slouched down and his head slumped forward on his chest as he leaned back against a wall. Dried blood caked the front of his shirt. Raven knew that these people, like the man passed out on rice wine, were regulars, and the store and the hotel owners couldn't be bothered calling the ambulance unless it was a matter of life and death. Farther down the block, a woman lay passed out in the doorway. A man sat nearby, guarding her. His back rested against the wall. There was no telling how long he had been waiting for her to come to. A hotel at the end of the block was playing loud honky-tonk music. The smell of stale beer and the sound of drunken laughter floated out of its swinging doors. Raven passed a pawn shop. The sign out front read, "Top Cash Paid." People streamed in and out carrying radios, televisions, and CDs. At the next corner, a small triangular park was home to people passed out on benches. One woman, talking loudly, stopped long enough to grab a brown snack from the guy next to her. She tilted the bag toward her mouth and took a long swig. A brown sack, sorry. One woman, talking loudly, stopped long enough to grab a brown sack from the guy next to her. She tilted the bag toward her mouth and took a long swig. Raven passed clothing stores with metal bars on the windows, and farther along there was a well-stocked meat market with two pink neon pigs above the store's entranceway. Most of the other buildings along the street were boarded up. Printed in bold letters across the next building were the words, "Vancouver Security, Canine Patrol." At the next corner, Raven paused by a concrete monument with wreaths placed at its base. She skirted around the monument and walked up the pathway to a park bench to rest her weary feet. Everyone in the park recognized a green kid when they saw one. She didn't belong there. She was no street person, too squeaky clean. She looked for someone with a friendly face to turn to. An old woman with a shopping cart wheeled past. Raven approached her, taking the picture out of her pocket. "Excuse me," Raven inquired, holding out the photo. The old woman, blind in one eye and hard of hearing, hadn't seen Raven. As soon as she focused, she started screaming at the top of her lungs. "Leave me alone! They're coming! Now see what you've done? Gotta hide! Run! You've made them mad!" wailed the old woman as she shook her gloved fist in the air. Raven backed away slowly. The old woman pulled her tattered coat tightly around her, turned abruptly, and walked away, cursing. "What you want, girlie?" a small, fat woman on a park bench called out. My sister's lost. I'm trying to find her," stuttered Raven. "You got a picture or something?" the old woman interrupted. Raven approached her carefully, still shaken from her last encounter. "Well, do you want to find your sister or not? I ain't got all day," she snapped the stranger. "I'm sorry," Raven choked, handing her the picture. She looked at it, then at Raven. "I haven't seen her lately," the woman replied. "Then you know her," Raven said excitedly. "Nope, didn't say I knew her. Just seen her around, that's all." "When did you see her last?" Raven insisted. "Can't remember. Days, months, hours. They're all the same down here. Makes no difference. No difference. Besides, I haven't seen her at this end of the strip. That one hangs out by Death's Door anyhow," the woman whispered. "Where's that?" "You watch yourself, girlie. Remember what old Birdie is telling you." "Do you know a JL?" Raven asked. "Nope," the old woman said abruptly, getting up. Raven started to walk down the hill. The old woman yelled after her, "What's your name, kid? If I hear anything, I'll let you know. I'm always in the park this time of day." "Raven," she answered, waving goodbye to the old woman. Raven headed back down the strip to the south side of Hastings Street. A gang of men who looked South American milled around the next corner. One of the men, flashing hand signals, gestures that must have meant something to someone else reading them across the street. A dark blue van stopped, and two of the men walked over. One passed the driver a small packet. The man walked back to the group, counting money. A woman loped along behind him, her arms dangling as she reached out to him. He zigzagged, trying to lose her. Her long, skinny arms swung in front of her like a monkey's. The man threw a small piece of paper on the ground, and she pounced on it, but it was empty. He'd tricked her. She slumped in a doorway, exhausted. Raven quickly averted her face in an attempt to avoid staring. A man stepped directly in her path and blocked her way. Terrified, she sidestepped him and hurried across the intersection. She stopped at a small grocery store, purchased 2 apples, a box of animal crackers, and a bottle of pop. Her feet hurt from all her walking. Outside the store, 3 teenage boys were hanging around on rollerblades. One wore only a trench coat and shorts and was covered in tattoos. He passed a small packet to the 2 younger guys, then skated away. Raven munched nervously on her animal crackers and watched the people across the street in Pigeon Park. A man lay on the ground, passed out cold, with his eyes swollen shut. His hair was encrusted with dried blood. She crossed the street, then carefully skirted around him as she walked cautiously toward another group of men huddled on a bench. "I'm trying to find my sister," Raven pleaded. Her small hands trembled as she held out the picture. "Beat it, kid!" snarled one of the men. Raven turned away. She showed the picture to everyone in the park, but it was always the same answer. "Nope, haven't seen her." She looked for a telephone to call Rita. Maybe she had returned. The hall phone at the hotel rang and rang. She expected she'd be on her own again tonight. It was too late to phone her father at the store. She'd have to wait until tomorrow to leave him a message. Earlier, a policeman on patrol had warned her of a demented woman wandering the streets, sticking people with an infected needle. As a result, Raven constantly looked over her shoulder, afraid the woman would sneak up on her and stab her when her back was turned. It was late afternoon, and she was weary and a bit lost. She looked down alleys for an empty fire escape to safely perch on while she looked at her map. She found an accessible ladder and climbed 2 flights to the top. She made herself comfortable, propping her knapsack under her head for a pillow, and took the map from her pocket. Suddenly, she heard voices below her. She would be undetected as long as she didn't make any sudden noises or movements. Raven inched up over the stair so that she could see the people below, but made sure to remain out of their line of vision. "Can I interest you in doing a little chui lung, ladies?" the man chuckled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tinfoil and a straw. "Yeah, light it up, man," a girl said eagerly. The man held a lighter under the foil as the 2 young girls took turns chasing the dragon's tail of curling smoke. The noxious fumes rose upward to Raven. Afraid she would sneeze, she stuck her index finger under her nose, but a tiny snuffled "achoo" escaped. "Did you hear something?" one girl mumbled. "Nah, it's just the wind. Time to get back to work. You've only been out here 6 hours, half a day, yet you still haven't earned your keep. See you back here in a couple of hours. Make sure you make it worth my while," the man ordered. The trio split up, the girls going in one direction, the man in another. Raven huddled on the fire escape until she was sure they would not be coming back. A cold wind had picked up, chilling her through and through. It carried the scent of a urine-drenched alley up to her nostrils. She grabbed her knapsack and walked along Jackson Street. According to the map, this was the way to Oppenheimer Park, a place her sister had mentioned in her diary. Raven walked until she came to a sign that indicated she was in the right place. She sat on a bench and watched people coming and going. No one appeared to have anywhere to go. Raven decided to survey the passerby about her sister. She showed the picture to an elderly woman who passed it on to an old man seated beside her. "Ralph, you remember this girl?" the woman said loudly. "Yeah, she was working for some Lonnie guy last I heard," he said, nodding his head. "If you don't want to end up dead, stay far away from him. You'll find him and his junkies hanging around the Balmoral Hotel most nights," he wheezed. "Where is the Balmoral?" "Close to the death's door, the gateway, the entrance into the pit," he coughed. "How can I find it?" "You don't find it. It finds you. Some are foolish enough to hang around, shooting up. Others take the easy way out, commit suicide. They skydive off the roof of the hotel." The old woman told the man to leave Raven alone. He was just scaring her. Raven headed out of the park past the man who was passed out with his head propped against a tree trunk. As she neared him, an unpleasant odor floated toward her, and she saw he was covered in open sores. He obviously needed more help than she could offer. She felt helpless on these streets. How could they survive out there? Who did take care of them?